That's 100 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
That's 100 years ago. And it's taken 100 years to really feel the impact of those thinkers in our modern time. And I think this is not what we're supposed to be talking about, but I think understanding Paul Johnson's modern from the 20s until the 90s, is that what he does?
20 to the it's like to Reagan, I think.
Okay.
88.
Oh, so I think we're actually in the exact same place that we were for World War I. We're back there again.
Yep. Yeah, we're back.
Think,
we've got all of the, and honestly, I think I think that there are forces that want us to go to world war.
Well, and there were forces then that were trying to destroy the Western. It's not different. Again, it's not any different. They're trying to destroy the Western worldview, the Christian worldview, the objective, true biblical worldview. It was an attack on objectivity from the beginning.
Yeah, I think the difference is the center of that, the geographical center this time is America, of that old worldview, so that it's taken longer for it to degrade over here. But we're in that moment of degradation, or have been, I think, since the 90s.
Okay, so here's what I couldn't figure out with COVID. So this is what was interesting with me. Not with me, but interesting with the situation since 2020. When 2020 happened, it was the first time in my lifetime that I saw the whole world do the same thing.
Okay.
So you go back. So inside of Johnson's book, what he does is he says, look, every nation went totalitarian in one way or another. Every nation started doing some sort of socialist takeover of economics, of land.
1917, 1918.
Some sort of war type setup where we have to start building. Look what Russia's doing. Oh my goodness, they're growing. We better start figuring out how to get our economy growing in the same way, because we need to be able to control the production to be able to make better weapons faster so we can win this war that's about to happen.
Yeah.
Right. So everybody jumped in and did the exact same thing. Everybody started taking over private industries. Everybody had new entities in their government created so that they can control private industry ultimately.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And so, but every nation was watching every nation almost like a Mexican standoff.
Right.
You know, and what was weird was I hadn't thought about this until reading his book, but the whole world just did that. The whole world, not with guns pointed at each other, but with guns pointed at an ideology. Right? Individual responsibility and individual freedoms worldwide just came under a massive assault from everybody's government. We have never seen that in the last 100 years.
Yeah, there's never been anything. I mean, there hasn't been anything like that since the Revolutionary Age, right?
Sure.
You had
that,
a whole series of overthrows. But you did have something similar, maybe during the Reformation.
Oh, sure. Yeah. You know what? I don't doubt that at all. But in the last 100 years?
But in the last 100 years, nothing.
I ain't seen nothing like that in the last 100 years.
Not since the 19-teens.
Right, exactly. And so if history has these echoes to it because of man's sinfulness or because of man's committedness to God's word, whichever way they're deciding to go, then it's pointing to something else that's about to happen. Right. And when I see this lineup, I'm not nervous, but I am a little concerned because of the way of man's depravity is going. It means there's going to be a whole lot of preaching, a whole lot of covenant lawsuit brought to the situation, which I'm not afraid of. But I am observing that I've never seen the world move in a way that has been in sync like this. And this is the purpose. The purpose was so that people could be ultimately underneath the ideology, underneath all that stuff, was be the first to take control of whatever the new world was going to be.
Yeah.
Because everybody knew the world was about to change from whatever it was before the 1900s to this whole new thing.
Well, I mean, you see, like when Jesus talks about "I'm with you till the end of the age," that's a translation of a phrase that has to do with the age of ages, right? Like we're in the sort of an age of ages, and Jesus will be with us through all of the ages, right? And it's really, there's about a 400-year cycle throughout history of these ages, and then you get kind of a whole new world coming into existence, a whole new way of people relating to each other, a whole new system of how people rule over one another, rule themselves, relate to one another, define themselves, what kind of character they see themselves as in the story. You kind of have this 400-year cycle. And the last real major upset was the 16th century. And you've got 1917, or you've got 1517, then 400 years later, you've got 1917 in Europe, which is all of the revolutions crack open, and by the end of it, there is only one. I think they're the only monarch that survives is the Queen of England, or is England. Yep. Right? You don't have any monarchs that survive.
Wow.
Right. So, I mean, the whole world is changed by the revolutions, that age of revolution. It just didn't hit America until, I mean, I guess it
kind of did, though.
It kind of did hit America. And I mean, the Civil War was, in many ways, it was a revolution.
Well, just the American Revolution, which shouldn't be called a revolution in the traditional sense. The War for Independence. How about
the War for Independence? But that was an attempt to hold on to the old world.
Right.
The American War for Independence, the Covenant lawsuit that was brought against King George said, "You're trying to do something different. We want things to remain the same." Right? We have rights as Englishmen that have been established since the 1200s, legally, and we want them to continue to apply. And you're refusing to protect our rights. That we're taxed by our representatives, by our covenant heads, not by somebody else. Right? That this is all well established. Hundreds of years old English law, and King George isn't backing it up. He's letting the revolution that's happening in England affect the empire, affect his other. They have a relationship directly with the king, and
he's breaking all kinds of covenants because of this.
Right? Yeah. And so their accusation was, "You're changing things. We want things to stay the same." When he refuses to step up and keep them the same, then they throw him off in order to keep the old world order intact, because in their mind, he's the revolutionary, right? In terms of changing the setup. So you've got this crazy thing going on, but it's more like Europe is beginning to undo itself, and they're saying, "No, we'd rather not."
Do you
yeah,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, so you just get, so in 1800, the America is trying to establish what is it that we're holding on to, right? And you've got some revolutionaries that want to burn everything down and overthrow it and start something new. Thomas Paine, for example. But he's not the popular
Common
writer.
Sense, Common Paine?
Common sense, yeah. Yeah. So he wants to overthrow everything and have a new world order, right? But he's not particularly popular. He's popular in Europe. He's popular later when you actually have people trying to change the world order, change the setup. He becomes popular later. At the time, he publishes, and there are people that read him, and people that take him on as a sort of common enemy of our enemy, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But he doesn't really win out until much later. And so, early 1900s, he becomes a popular, you've sort of got history rewritten as he was really popular, and he's the one that defines who we are as Americans. But it's because now the real revolution is happening. Or the attempted. I mean, the revolution in America fails because there was an attempted communist takeover of America, and it failed because of Senator Joe McCarthy.
I like how you said that right before you, Dre. It was like, I'm gonna drop that out there for everybody. So man, I feel like we got a lot of. There's a lot I have questions on, but going through it seems very important to me to talk about a lot of the world that created what Freud is, or what comes from Freud. And it's not in isolation, which is like, oh, you can't just learn about. That's something that I've been really noticing, about this, Jason, is that you can't learn about these guys in isolation. And everybody who I'm watching right now is learning about a lot of these guys in isolation. And so then they don't know even how to apply it. They don't know what Marxism looks like. They just call everything Marxism. They don't know what Gnosticism is. So then everything's Marxism and not Gnosticism, which it should be. And then they don't really know how to fight it, or how. And first, it seems because you're baptized in it, like Freudianism.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is one of those things that I'm finding out that we are just baptized in our language, in the way we think about the world, all that, and this just Gnosticism again, kind of happening all over. But what is it, that I'm thinking about? What is it that by the time we get done with this, that I'm going to know and understand and be able to operate in our current situation? I kind of want to back in a little bit, maybe that way for me. It's just like, because I feel like it's so big. I don't want to miss the.
Yeah. I mean, I think what the reason that Freud took off and became so popular was because there was a real existential dislodgement from reality that people were actually experiencing. And Freud comes in with this fake scientific objectivity, promising to solve the problem of them being of the experience of being dislodged from history, dislodged from the world, of suddenly not knowing how to not knowing where they fit in the world, right? So they're watching
again, though,
yeah,
right?
exactly. So Freud offers a Gnostic solution to to a problem, of a real problem that people are experiencing, the world disintegrate out from underneath them, and the things that they thought were solid turned out to be turns out to not be as solid as they thought. And so then they said, well, is there anything solid or not? Freud comes in and gives this false scientific objectivity, promising that he's about to provide a solid place for them to stand inside themselves.
Oh, that's good. Okay, so there's two things I wanted to say real quick. So I want to know, what is it that's dislodging people at this time?
Yeah,
Because that's super important. And the other thing is, I want to talk about just quickly in passing. When I'm thinking about Gnosticism, I'm thinking of Eric Voegelin's conversation. You know, he defines it really well in what Science, Politics, and Gnosticism. Again, is
yeah,
the book.
yeah,
And I love his definition, how he kind of sums it up inside of the fact that Gnosticism ultimately, at least how he's dealing with it and talking about it, is ultimately being completely displaced on earth. It's a metaphysical problem. A person, the idea that a person does not feel like they were made for this planet and there's something missing, and they need to find this hidden truth and knowledge that connects them back with where they're supposed to be otherworldly.
right.
Is that fair? Right.
So yeah. So Gnosticism says that that if you get the right thoughts or ideas in your head, then you can connect to reality, which is non-physical and ahistorical, right? So that reality, to be truly connected to reality, you have to separate from history, and from matter, or from your body, because those things are tricking you. Those things are veils that are keeping you from reality. And that if you get the right ideas in your head, then you can connect to reality, and that changes your nature, right? It evolves you into a different kind of creature, different kind of being, and then you'll find you'll find the satisfaction that you're looking for. But it's something that is through the right ideas, the right secret. You know, you see that novel, the Secret, that's around. I think they just made a movie out of it. Yeah. That's just like pure Gnosticism, straight Gnosticism. And it's really appealing to people that feel dislodged from history and feel dislodged from their own life.
Well, and that's everybody right now feels that way, right? Everybody feels like something. It's almost like, instead of saying there's no such thing as sin, it's using sin as a way to say, hey, it's not that you're disconnected from God in the sense that you have no relation with him. No, you're disconnected from the way the world is even working and operating.
Right.
You're
So
dislodged from.
They call it like ennui or anxiety. That anxiety is the feeling of not having a place where you fit, right? Or not knowing where you fit at the moment, right? That is pretty much everybody. That's the problem everybody has right now, right? Anxiety is off the charts.
Yeah.
And there's all these promises of a false return to immediacy, because anxiety separates us from our own life, so we can't live it in the moment. We end up observing our life, observing ourselves live our life. This is I call it living in the balcony of your own life, where you look down on it and you watch yourself live. That feeling of anxiety is fairly universal right now. And the opposite of anxiety is immediacy, right? That you are experiencing in the moment the life that you're living, right? And that's one of the things that Freud promises. But we've got this all sorts of things promising this, right? This is why Zen philosophy comes in and out of vogue. This is why yoga comes in and out of vogue, right? They're promising immediacy. You've got like there was a while where like encounter groups were really popular. You'd get together and you would share your feelings and try and feel them in the moment together, right? So but this is also why drug culture takes off, right? It takes off in England a little bit earlier than in America, but you get this massive drug culture of people looking for immediacy, they're trying to figure out, how do I cover up the anxiety, or how do I have the kind of experience of immediacy? I mean, it's amazing. when you hear people, talk while they're smoking pot about like the universe is opening up to me, and like all of that's the promise that they're given, that drugs are somehow going to do that. Now we've got anti-anxiety medicine, like where your doctor will give you
that same kind of euphoria.
The same kind of euphoria. Or what's the opposite of euphoria? Like a dysphoria, right? They're trying to pull you down into the moment and out of the euphoria that you are constantly feeling as you bounce along the top of the world and can't enter in and experience it. That is something that really starts in the early 1900s. So you don't have people really talk like that other times, right? Like there's certain things that start coming into people's experience, like anxiety, boredom, right? You don't have boredom in the ancient world. You don't have boredom in the Middle Ages. Like it's not an experience that people have until you get to the modern age, right? Where you've got these bored, anxious people who are willing to try anything to make it go away.
It's funny because I think we've looked at our technology as the reason why we have boredom. You are just locked into your computer screen. You're locked into this world. And so because you're locked into all this digital stuff, you haven't experienced the natural stuff. And so you have boredom because of that. But the problem is even deeper.
Right. The reason that we use technology the way we do is because we come to it as bored and anxious people.
Looking for it to solve the problem that we
looking for it to solve the problem. Yeah.
And we're bringing the problem. It's like, it's not bringing the problem. We're bringing the problem to it.
Yeah.
Okay. So then, take me. Okay. I've heard and I've understood in one way or another that we've been in conversation with Freud. But I really don't know. And I haven't been, in any detail what that really means. So everybody's, the Freudian slip,
Yeah.
But Freud, go ahead.
Well, there's a number of phrases that he created that we use all the time. Ego, Freudian slip,
ego. That's his.
That's his. Yeah. So, I don't know. Should we explain Freud and then explain why he was attractive, or should we go the other way?
Dude, teach me whatever you want to tell me at this point. However you want to go through this. Your mic's still distorting just a little bit. I don't know what it is. So I don't know.
Okay.
It might not be your gain. It might just be your overdriving it because I've never seen you like this. I've never, not that you haven't cleaned up before. I've seen you like that, but since we've been talking about these characters, I've never seen you so turned up where it's like you're driving. There's usually a moment in the conversation where you turn up, but for whatever reason, this one has you on edge.
So here's the thing. So in the 6th grade, I declared myself an atheist, and then shortly thereafter found Freud in my public library and became a fully committed Freudian in junior high. And so for me,
that's dangerous.
This one's pretty personal. I was reading Freud and committed, thinking I had finally found somebody that was answering what was wrong with me. And so I got really into Freud, and the fail as Freud failed, I started getting it still distorting.
Yeah. I think it's just you. I'm
just talking too loud.
I think you're just turned,
I'm just too excited. Yeah.
You can just lean back off the mic. I think it'll come.
Lean back off the mic a little bit.
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah.
I'm usually have to lean in just to.
That's because you're so quiet and you're talking like this. And now you're like, Freud.
So Freud did a lot of damage to me personally, and so he gets me. I get really upset, and the moment that I realized Freud was a fraud was a huge disappointment and a letdown. And so I got into Sartre and existentialism, and right after that, to try and figure out how to hold off the depression that Freud was making stuff up.
I knew something was going on. I was like,
yeah,
Jason.
So Freud, he came on the scene right at a time when the old world is disintegrating, right? World War I disintegrated Christendom. It disintegrated any sort of international expectation that international peace was going to become a norm, right? You had war and peace, times of war, times of peace before that, but there was always this expectation that we were moving towards international peace, and that the times between the wars were getting longer and longer because of the influence of Christianity. That when the Prince of Peace was your King of Kings, then it shifted from always being at war and rivals with everyone that wasn't you, to the expectation that, well, no, actually peace is possible, peace is coming, we're on our way towards peace. Even all of the secular philosophers were very optimistic at the end of the 19th century, the late 1800s. And then because of a series of misguided treaties, as well as a really messed up economic philosophy, you end up with the whole world going to war, the whole known world going to war. And when that disintegrated the confidence in the story that you've always been telling yourself about the history of the world, it disintegrated the memory, right? Because you have a real breakdown between the generations, because you have the previous generations, they go to war on horses with sabers and some cannons, maybe, but you don't even always have cannons, right? You go to war with sabers and horses. You start getting some guns, but guns are much less effective than just riding up and stabbing each other, right?
Because they only refire one shot, not that big of a deal.
So even your gun you're going to kill more people with the knife on the front end of your gun than you are going to with the actual bullets that you shoot, right? So war is a face-to-face affair. You go from that to World War I, where you've got mass death by gas attack. You've got machines of war. You've got bombs that are really destructive. You've got this mechanization of war that when the soldiers come back, that at the time they called it shell shock, right? It was and they were trying to figure out how to deal with it, right? This is where electroshock therapy begins, where these soldiers are coming back with shell shock. We call it PTSD now. And they're trying to shock them out of it with electroshock therapy, as if shell shock is something that nobody else has ever gone through. What's really going on, though, is there's always been PTSD, right? Caesar writes about it in his Gallic Wars, the nightmares that soldiers have when they come back. But the difference is your uncle, your grandpa, your dad, they had gone through the same thing. And when you got back, they would say to you, come here, let me promise you it gets better. It goes away. They could help them back into society. Fathers and men could help their sons back into the society because of the common experience. Like, yes, I get it. War is hell. It's the worst. But we've all been through it. You're coming back in. These World War I soldiers come back, and the dad says, it's okay, we've all been through it. And he's like, oh, so you know what it's like to watch all of your friends all die from suffocation in a hole in the ground together because you're the only one that gets your gas mask on? they're like, oh no, actually the impersonal mechanized war wasn't a common experience. And so they remained outside of society. They couldn't get back in, but then they had to take over society. So the world had disintegrated out from underneath them. Their confidence in the story they'd been telling goes away. Their memory goes away because of this generation gap. There's nobody to share it with, and so they're completely existentially dislodged. At the same time, Einstein's theory of relativity is proven, or scientifically proven, and everybody misunderstands what he was doing. Right? He's talking about the curvature of the space-time continuum and the fact that light doesn't move in a straight line.
Right.
That's his theory of relativity. Is all about the curvature of space-time, and how the space and that from within the universe, time is can't be considered a constant anymore. That unless you have a point outside the universe that you can compare everything to, then you are a part of what's going on with time. And so there's not an objective point outside of the universe that we have access to measure change against. And so time then is relative in our experience.
So would you say Einstein is really understanding the creature-creator divide in one sense?
Einstein he's recognizing something about the creature-creator divide. The problem is nobody actually quite understands what he's talking about at a popular level. Everybody just hears relativity has been proven, and they hear relativism has been proven.
They make word association games and create a whole new ideology out of what he's saying.
A whole new proof of this. It becomes something that helps prove this existential dislodgement to be a universal experience, right? So they start to think that this is a universal experience, but Einstein's scientific objectivity becomes the ideal, right at the same time that existential dislodgement becomes the universal experience of the men of the time.
This is really interesting, because if that's how you're thinking, it just seems like education had to be somewhat eroded in one sense or another, because that would be a logical fallacy that science that what Einstein is trying to prove, he objectively proved a relativistic world.
Right.
So how could even then, if that's the case, then what Einstein just proved doesn't really matter anyway.
Right. Well,
right. So if that's what he was actually doing.
Right. But this is when if you have to remember that the education, reading, writing, and arithmetic is something that's mostly taught at home. You've got a lot of schools going. The moral education is happening at church. The theological revolution begins in the 1850s of modern theology, right? Of materialistic theology going on in Europe, right? And the explanations of religion, the demiracleization of the Bible, explaining away, that's all going on in the church right at this time. And so they're losing an objective standard, morally speaking, because they're going to church, and the people that are supposed to be holding the moral ground and teaching it to them are busy with higher criticism, trying to figure out which manuscript tradition this part of Genesis comes from and that part of Genesis comes from. That they have completely lost sight of the gospel in the church in Europe, and in a lot of places in America as well. So so they should have recognized what's going on, but the church was too busy removing its own moral eyeballs to see anything clearly.
So we've all become Pharisees in one sense, and that's it.
Right, so, exactly.
So, Jason, would you say too at this point? So, postmillennialism used to be the normative inside of Christianity, but at this point, this is kind of where postmillennialism kind of dies in Western culture, Western world, because we're thinking that, hey, everything is coming together. It's about to be more peaceful than it's ever been before. And kind of a false understanding of even postmillennialism is kind of running rampant. And all of a sudden, whoosh, World War I happens.
Well, what happens is the eschatology ends up separated from total depravity. Right? So you have total depravity sticks with the theologically orthodox, and they become suspicious of anyone that's optimistic because the secularists are all optimists, right? So you have this secular optimistic eschatology. Karl Marx fits right into this. And all of the socialists are, claiming progress, but you also have a really, really interesting. It would be like laissez-faire capitalism that is also optimistic and destructive, right? So if you read like The Jungle, about the laissez-faire capitalists employing little tiny kids because their hands are smaller and they can get into the machines, but the kids are dying and having their hands ripped off and things, and they're not doing anything about it. They're like, well, now he can't work for me anymore, so they're firing them, right? It's really messed up laissez-faire capitalism, but they're really big into progress as well, right? So it's sort of that morality and economics are separated, and economics is now a force that's going to push the human race forward into its next phase, versus the government power is going to be the force that pushes the human race forward into its next phase. But they're both thinking in non-covenantal, almost magical terms, one about economics, one about government power, and they become the right and the left. Right? And so the church, originally what they do is they say, well, no, we don't agree with either of you. There is no magical way for the humans to stop being sinful. We can only become forgiven. Right? And they leave the optimistic eschatology to the secularists, and they take the total depravity with them. Right?
Okay, I'm sorry, but when you said they can't stop from being sinful, they can only become forgiven. That sounds like the argumentation of Lordship Salvation coming into play right there against Lordship Salvation. You can make Jesus your Lord and Savior, but he can't stop you from sinning. You're stuck in unless you make him Lord and Savior, right? And it's like, well,
right, yeah.
So you get that controversy happening really right in that same era then, because they're just connecting the two.
So the Victorian preachers, Spurgeon, they're having to argue against some of these errors. Spurgeon is, optimistic premillennialist. He's, but he's arguing, well, no, if Jesus is your savior, then he is also going to be transforming you, and you're going to be, growing in the faith and growing in your moral abilities and all of that. Right. MacArthur wrote a great book on it. I can't remember what it's called.
He had the Lordship Salvation controversy that he fought. So I remember that.
It's a really. I want to say getting the gospel right, but I don't know if that is
the gospel according to Jesus was one. Gospel.
well, is that that's the, and I think that's the one where he uses Spurgeon, the controversies with Spurgeon. It's a really great book. But so theologically in the church, you have people going after the doctrine of total depravity, going after the doctrine of the depravity of man, and they're the same people that are optimistic eschatologically, right? And so they just really do this this thing where they say we can't lose the depravity of man because the gospel depends upon it completely, and they're 100% right. But many of them move away from any sort of optimistic eschatology and set themselves up for dispensationalism, which comes in right at the same time. Right. This
is perfect for dispensationalism because according to the way dispensationalists see the world, this is evidence of that.
Right.
Right. The whole falling World War I, because if you start reading some of the works of that time and era, man's depravity in war had not ever been at this level. It
had been, you give depraved man more power and they use it to be depraved, right? And that's
right. In ways that were unique to the modern mind, at least at this time.
Yeah, unique to the experience, right? And
of the West, maybe.
As soon as mass murder becomes a possibility, technologically, mass murder in war it becomes a reality, right? And that's, I mean, it's just like, the internet is a crazy transformation of it's an information revolution, communication revolution, all that. And so what do? Well, we create pornography websites, and that's
so
what
human
we
beings
do.
Easier on
Right.
Websites,
yeah, exactly. So that's what sinful people with more power use that power to sin more, to sin in bigger ways. And so you have in the church the loss of confidence in our story, and you've got the same loss of memory going on, because all of a sudden, you read somebody who has that everyone that was optimistic about the future of the gospel becomes suspect. And so you begin getting a distrust of the history of previous generations, because they were optimistic. That led to World War I, right? That's what they think, right?
Okay.
And so they you get a dehistoricization almost of
dehistoricization
of the church, right? They stop teaching historically. They stop saying, here's the history of the church. Here's what previous generations have taught. Let me tell you about these authorities within our people. They're not authorities at the level of Scripture, right? Previous generations.
This is your family history, though.
Yeah, but it's your family history, right? So you lose a lot of the traditions. They get really suspicious of anything liturgical, because the people that are still using the liturgies are also now denying the inerrancy of Scripture, right? You've got that Trinity, sort of thing, right? And so there's some baby thrown out with the bathwater. At the same time, they were protecting they were the ones that protected the baby, right? The whole, this is when the fundamentalist the fundamentals of the Christian faith were written, which is the doctrinal statements of the fundamentalists, and right, which were really good, right? They were really well thought out, well educated. They wrote the fundamentals of the faith, and they said, here's what we all agree on. And then they went and hid. And then they started to retreat. But they retreated and continued to preach the gospel, right? That didn't happen everywhere. There were countries where they just stopped preaching the gospel altogether. And in America, at least, our fundamentalist and the charismatic movement kicks off about this time, and there's a lot of good fruit.
Azusa Street and all that stuff.
Azusa Street, So, and some of the, and you had some of that in Wales. You had the Welsh revival and around the same time, and so there were some nations in Europe that held on longer, but America kind of holds on the longest because it's recognized that the modernist movement ideology is infiltrating the church, and people moved out of the way and started new denominations and to protect the gospel.
Well, and I think that there's more to it too. The reason that America has survived the longest is because I don't know of another institution that has had the sphere sovereignty set up in its fundamentals and foundations in such a way that has given people throughout history a time to fight and appeal back to that. If America wasn't set up that way, slaves would not be free in America with what we currently have, this type of setup of freedom. I think, there's foundational Christian roots to our documents that we can appeal to, and a conscience of the people that is still pricked because of the preaching of the gospel that we can have still, which gives me so much hope for our current situation, to be very honest with you, that I don't see hope in other, like in Canada. I ain't gonna lie to you. I just think you need to get out. If you're in Austria, good luck, buddy.
I was just having my kids practice saying, "No, officer, we don't have Canadians in the basement at dinner this week." Like, everybody has to practice saying it. We're gonna practice because we're ready. We're gonna put them in our basement if we need to, and so my kids all had to go around and practice each saying, "No, officer, we don't have Canadians in the basement."
You know what? You ain't, man. You ain't. You know what's okay?
No, I mean, it's totally serious. It's funny, but it's
totally
also serious. Like, we're 100% ready to hide my Canadian brothers and sisters.
Absolutely, at a drop of a dime, they can come stay with me. And here's what. So just for quick time, I will get right back to Freud.
Yeah,
but I had to say this, man. I had to reevaluate how I thought about the current. Right now, conservatives are arguing against the influx of people coming to the country illegally. I had to re-examine my position on this a little bit, because if a whole bunch of Christian Canadians come running through the border, I think that those guys, rightfully so, are under religious persecution. We should have a setup to be able to, and we don't. And I'm like, all of a sudden when they start yelling, the other side starts saying, like, you know what, we do need to get them out of the country, and everybody needs to be expelled and send them back to where they came from. And I got like, half of Christian Canada sitting up here in America. I'm gonna be like, I think we need to change some laws so that they become American citizens just by being here. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean,
like,
honestly, ministering in California, it caused me to rethink a lot of my ideas about immigration, because when you have a messed up immigration system that keeps shifting and changing, you can have people that 3 years ago did exactly what they were supposed to do, and now all of a sudden they're illegal.
Yeah.
And how do you system? We have an unjust system because of the changing weights and measures, and so the reform needs to go all the way to the ground. And in the meantime, we need a better way to arrest and put to death people that are kidnappers. And
amen. And this is why this is why another reason why you can't be Republican or Democrat on this. You have to be very Christian and have an objective standard of what that looks like. And you got to know when to hold them. You got to know when to fold them. You got to know when to walk away. And you got to know when to run, baby.
Yeah. 100%. And that there are that if you study the immigration laws of the Old Testament and say there's wisdom here that should be transforming us into people that understand the wisdom and figure out how to apply it to our situation, you are not going to end up with either the Republican or the Democratic immigration policies, because they both, I think, are making similar errors.
Yeah, because they're playing a game with people's lives. How can we get more people to vote for us and on our side?
Yep.
That's not what you're supposed to be doing. Anyway, that's a whole nother.
It is, but because the immigration of the Old Testament, you're supposed to look at them and see God's grace to you reflected in the mirror of somebody that is currently immigrating, right? Oh, I once had to wander, right?
That's what
and
God tells you to do in the Old Testament. That's
right?
exactly how He told him to think about. Yeah.
And so we have to figure out, what does that mean? How do we see anyone looking to seeing immigrants as mirrors of God's previous grace to us, and then figuring out, but that's what I mean. Like, that's a wisdom issue that I don't think, I mean, you don't solve that with a wall.
Right.
And walls don't just keep people out, they keep people in too. So walls, I don't know if I want a bunch of walls up.
2020 made me say no walls, walls. I want,
but I do want, but we need immigration reform. It's just,
I guess I wouldn't mind the walls if, the walls, they do both things. But the question is, do you have the blessing of God on your nation?
Right.
Or do you have God's curse on your nation? And if you have a blessing of God on your nation, then walls are great.
Right. When walls are functioning properly, what they do is they create doorways so that you know who's coming in the right way and who's coming in the wrong way. Right. So Jesus says that the person that's sneaking in through the window is not your friend. Right. And that it takes a wall with a door in it to make it clear who's sneaking in through the window.
Yeah.
But we don't have a clear understanding of that. And so walls aren't going to function properly when we're not under the blessing of God. Okay,
Jason, so do you know where you're going to go next? Because I want to ask you a question that has to do with that.
I mean, I know where.
Okay, so as long as you can, because I don't want you to get lost. I don't want to, but one of the things that I'm seeing in the conversation that you and I have been having, and this is me looking at this because I know that I'm ignorant in so much of what I'm looking at my enemies and what I have to face and the culture in front of me. And I'm saying, okay, there's a lot I don't know, Lord, to be able to engage with this subject in a real way, to be able to defeat the enemy. And so then I go back and I look and it's like, oh, there's this massive, 10,000 square foot library that has all the information I need to be able to fight the bad guys. Here's my dilemma. I'm between the bad guys in the library. So if I stop to go read, which I feel like I need to do to grasp this knowledge and wisdom to be able to engage, then by the time I get done, the ruins are going to be outside the front door of the library. And maybe I burn down in the library at the same time. So I don't have time to go read. I got to go and get stuff done.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but if I go and I fight, I don't have the wisdom I need to be able to win. And so I die in battle and the ruins are still here at the same time, all over everywhere. And so I'm feeling within myself this weird conflict of, and maybe I'm getting the answers I'm talking about, of needing to go and fight and yet learn and fight and build. It's like kind of like the sword and the trowel thing is happening,
and exactly it's like what I was going to say.
And I know that's a reality, but practically, how do you, I guess we're doing it now, but how do you really do that so that, I'm going on Jason Whitlock. We're talking about cultural stuff all the time. I talk to you about it. I say, hey, Jason, help me think through this because I need help with this, but it feels like that there's a new battle. There's always something new. And I'm like, I just don't have the content or the information and what I need to be able to fight effectively. How do I, what's the way to do that practically? We know it's like, you got to have your sword and your trowel. You got to build and fight at the same time. The realities of that and how you do that almost feel overbearing.
Yeah. Well, I think if you don't feel like you can't take care of it on your own, then you're not seeing it properly, right? Like God is
explain that.
So
I see what you're saying. Yeah. If you look at it and think like, oh, I can handle this,
then you're not doing it by faith, right? You're not taking on the giants and doing it by faith. I spent time as a church planter, and in air quotes, I was a successful church planter, and I started getting calls, hey, can you come talk to us about how to plant a church? And I would always go in and say, I'm so glad you guys had me in to talk about how to plant a church, and I'm just here to tell you that you can't. Right? and because if you're not doing it by faith, then you're not doing it in a way that pleases God. We actually don't have the power to call a new congregation into existence, right? But that's what church planters do. They go into a place where there isn't currently a church, and through words call into existence something that wasn't there before. We actually don't have that power, but we have a promise from God that he is going to be doing that he loves doing that, and he loves sharing the task with people, right? It seemed like, just like evangelism, you can't actually convert somebody, but God can, and he does. He promises that he will, and he says it's such a wonderful thing. I want to share the task. Come along, come do evangelism with me. I love it. You're going to love it. Come on. And then by faith, we are a part of what God is doing, but it's well beyond our abilities. Paul even says, God didn't give me a pen that writes on hearts, right? If Paul doesn't have a pen that writes on hearts, how much less do we have a pen that writes on hearts? And yet by faith, God uses our words to write on hearts, right? That's and I think it's the same with the defense of our culture, the defense of our family, the defense of our people, the defense of our cities, that we say, well, Lord, I can't do this. This is too much. But by faith, we step out because God promises that he's our wall. He's our shield. He's our defender. And so we step out and say, okay, Lord, where's the giants? Where's the lion roaring? Let's go that direction. And then we just do it with a book in hand. Because we're also, there's also
and a quiver
walls,
full, baby.
Yeah, a quiver full. There's also, the walls within us and the that need to come down and be built up and all that.
That's really helpful, because all I can think about is like, that's really what faith is. And I think too, a vigor for the name of God, his holiness. I think that's something else that's missing, because even Calvin said this, even a dog barks when his master is attacked, right?
Right.
And the dog might be barking at a bear, but that's his master, right? You know what I mean? And I think for us, especially what I've seen maybe in the last couple years, is that we're like, boy, that's a big giant though. That's the federal government. Like and so many, like in DC, when the mayor has turned every business into the Gestapo and has given the church a pass for now, the church should have said, you ain't God. All churches should have joined together and said, you ain't God. You can't force people to get a vaccination. You can't ask them for their IDs, and you can't stop them from going to work in buildings where they get to provide for their family. You don't get to do that. Now, if God sends a famine, he gets to do that on the land, right? If he gives a famine to the heat, but you don't send famines, right? That's not you. Repent. And instead, we haven't done that because it's the mayor. Right. It's the governor. It's the government. And so a fervor for God's holiness and his name and understand his word even drives you when you don't necessarily have the knowledge, the wisdom, maybe even the sword to be able to fight with. You say, but I'll tell you what you're not going to do. You ain't going to sit up here and talk about my God like that. I might die, but what you're not going to do is act crazy with the Lord. You know, like that's a kind of, I'm feeling like more of a holiness, like people who talk about the holiness of God. I want to see that come from them as it relates, and even from myself, as it relates to the whole world, not this dysphoria, broken up kind of thing that happened after World War I, that we could, you know, that we separated the natural world from God's world. And the dispensational ideology and worldview is like, well, it's all going to go to hell. It's all going to burn. Don't worry about that. Get your salvation, all that stuff right. And then, you know, and it's not even, go ahead.
The giants in that land are really big, and there's no way we could ever bring them down.
So let's stay in the wilderness.
So we'll stay in the wilderness.
And die off for 40 years.
Yeah, for 40 years, right? And I think that, so you have all the evidence of a curse on America because you have the taking away of the alcohol, right? All the wine is God.
I'm sorry, what?
Takes it all away, right? So you've got, which is one of the curses that is listed in the Old Testament. So
did you say it's a curse because the alcohol got taken away?
Yeah, I mean, so you think about it. What's that? 1920, right? So
yeah, prohibition.
Prohibition comes along, God, and we should look at that and say, okay, curse, God, it's very clear, and say curses last either 40 or 70 years, depending on the curse, right? And so you've got prohibition. What I can't even remember what year it was. I got to look it up.
I'll look it up real quick. Go ahead.
So we should know. We should, in terms of church history, we should be looking at that 40 years and saying, did we repent as a people, right? From that, during that time, because that's what we should have been doing, is saying, Father, forgive us. Right.
Nationwide prohibition lasted from 1920 until 1933. So prohibition started like in 1920.
So 1920. So 33 to was that 73? That's about the Jesus People movement.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you've got and so you have a good solid revival there in the midst of the 70s. Now it could be the two visits of the priest before he knocks down the he comes and he cleans it all out, and then he comes cleans the house out, and then he comes back again to check on it and to see if the infection is gone. What was that? Leviticus 14, somewhere 13, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Right. So it could be that, right? The first, he comes in, here's the evidence of the curse. Now you guys go take care of it, make sure that it doesn't come back. And he comes back to check on us again. And, but that all we can do is say there is objective evidence that God put our nation under a curse, and that's because of the church.
January 16th, 1919, it was officially went into effect, and then it was ratified and passed on the 20th, January 17, 2020. So that's right around the same time that all this is going on, though.
Right.
So all this is happening.
All of this is going on. So right at this same time, Freud, he started writing in earlier than this, but he becomes popular right at this time through some novelists, through some poets, and you have World War I happening, and so people are not sure how to continue moving forward, right? They've lost faith that language can communicate. They've lost faith in the story of their people. They've lost their memory because the generation from one generation to the next, you've got a huge gap. and you have this fatal gap between man's awareness of himself and man's experience of the world, because the world no longer feels like a place or seems like a place that mankind fits anymore, right? You've got the integrated universe of the old world has gone away, right? It's no longer even taught, right? So public schools start at this time. They call it the scientific education with Dewey, because
shut up.
They're trying to find that. So they're replacing the older education with what they're calling the scientific education, because they're trying to find an objective perch that they can look at the world, figure out why they don't fit into it anymore, and re-enter the world, right? There's this existential dislodgement and scientific objectivity that both press forward at the same time.
So I just want to throw in there, if I'm seeing this now from having all these conversations with you, Machiavellianism becomes the way, because now schools become federalized, right? So
or
the education,
at least state level.
It's getting there. Yeah. It's moving towards that form of power, right?
Yep.
And so now, but the most important thing to notice is that education leaves the home.
Right? It becomes the government becomes the educator, and because the argument is that citizenship is the fundamental thing that defines us, and so the government. So rather than religion, right? So in the Middle Ages, your baptism is what defined you most fundamentally, right? I am a Christian. I am a part of the church. I am God's. I'm God's name. The Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit has been put on me, and I bear His name, right? That's the command to to bear the name of God well, right? Don't bear the name of God falsely, right? So we bear the name of God. Well, the part of the dislodgement that happens at this time is a lot of the older forms of Protestantism are they're the ones that are becoming modernists, and the Baptists are the ones that are holding the line on total depravity and on the need for the gospel, the need for grace, all of that.
They stay fundamentalist. Right?
They stay fundamentalists. People move. Christians move en masse to the Baptist churches because they're preaching the Bible. They're preaching the gospel's there. Yeah, right. So you become a citizen at birth. You become a Christian when you're old enough and rationalist and reasonable enough to make that decision for yourself. And so the citizenship becomes it becomes your fundamental identity, and your religion is an add-on later in life. And so the argument is made. Yeah. So the argument is made, well, if your citizenship is the most fundamental thing, then you need to be trained in your citizenship, right? So it takes a village to raise a child, right? Really, it takes a family to raise a village, villager. That's, I mean, biblically speaking, it takes a family to raise a villager. But you've got this move to fundamentalize your citizenship. And people are so dislodged that they're willing to accept it, right?
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm an American first. That becomes a relief, part of the relief. But that dislodgement that's happening at this, what happens is right at this time, Freud comes in and he offers a fake scientific objectivity that will solve the existential dislodgement.
How?
Right? So he comes in and he says, I will, I'm going to sit down with you, or I'm going to train scientists to sit down with people, and they're going to tell me about their psychoses, and I'm going to analyze them objectively. Right. And then explain to them how it is that they can re-enter their own life. And he basically creates a whole system that involves, you tell this scientist your dreams, you tell this scientist about your history, right? And then he helps reorient or rebuild your the way that you respond to things in your life, right? On a scientifically objective basis, right? Now, it has been proven without a shadow of doubt that all of Freud's science was fraudulent. Almost all of what he did was sit and think about his own life and then write objective treatises on psychoses that were actually his own, right? He just basically wrote journal entries and then published them as if somebody else had told it to him, and then he gave a scientific answer to it. But it was a lie, right? It was his own psychoses that he was publishing to and claiming it was other people's. So
go ahead.
It's just really messed up. So his stuff was really messed up. But the promise that a scientist could solve your existential dislodgement was so attractive that novelists, poets, songwriters, storytellers got a hold of it and spread it, and it spread like wildfire for a couple of decades.
So the reason it was attractive is because what was being sold was objective truth was back. Right? Is that why it was attractive?
Yeah, that objective truth,
reality.
That objective truth was back. And but here's the thing: is he was selling an objectivity that really is only available to God, right? We are a part of the world, right? We are a member of creation. He was claiming that a scientist could stand objectively and analyze as if he wasn't a part of creation. So it's like
Godism.
It was like one of the gears of the watch could climb out and then turn around and watch the watch work. The problem is it won't work if the gear is out of the watch, right? That
wow.
This was, for me, this was what undid Freud, is as soon as I realized that he's telling me that I can't trust my experience of the world because of that my ego is actually just my experience of the world, my ego, my selfhood, my experience of myself is actually just the conflict of my id, my fundamental base physical desires, and the superego, which is the expectations that the culture is putting on me. Right? That my experience of myself, my ego, is my id coming into conflict with the superego, and then that's how I gain a self-awareness, is because I'm trying to navigate the conflict between my id and the superego. The moment that I realized if that's true of me, then it's true of Freud. And if I can't trust me because that's all that I am, then I can't trust Freud because that's all that he is. It was like the rug got pulled out from underneath me, and I'd been using this Freudian argument to try and get girls to make out with me in junior high for a couple of years, and all of a sudden I was like, well, if that's true of me, And then that's true of Freud. If I can't trust me, then I can't trust Freud. He is not the objectively standing outside, because I'm not. There is no way to objectively stand outside of our own experience.
It's like your eyeballs seeing themselves.
Yeah, and so, but the problem is that way of thinking about ourselves is now pretty much standard, right?
Give me an example. Give me a clear example of that.
We talk about repression. You know, oh, you're just repressing something. You're repressing a desire, right? That's Freud, right? And he says that there are certain desires that we have to repress in order to be a part of a community, because we physically, biologically need a community to survive, right?
So when you say repress, it's not like suppressing. It's repressing is different.
We use the words interchangeably, but repression is the is the way that it's talked about psychologically, right? So you've got this desire within you, right? And we repress it in order to be a part of society, because if you just eat everything you see, then you'll get kicked out of the community, because everybody has to eat, right? And so we repress this desire to just eat everything, right? And for Freud, the fundamental defining feature of humanity was our desire for sex, right? That you have to have that. That has to evolve within you, so that so that the species continues. So unless a species evolves a fundamental desire for sex, then there won't be another generation, and you won't survive, right? Because he was a Darwinist. So that our fundamental desires are sex and food. And in order to have sex and have food, you have to have other people around. And so community becomes a necessity to be able to fulfill your desires. The problem is your desires, if are fundamentally antagonistic to community, right? So kind
of screwed here.
Community, right? Yeah, we're totally screwed, right? So the community creates a set of expectations through evolution called the superego, right? That it is the expectations of the community that need to be fulfilled for the community to continue. So a superego has evolved within the community that pushes your id down. That keeps your id
like collective think. Then, for the most part, is that like
collective think? Yeah.
Okay.
But then your id then comes into conflict with the superego, and our experience of ourselves then is created in that conflict, and that is called the ego, right? That's our self experience, our self awareness is the ego, and so an example. So then, if your ego is a bundle of anxiety, right? Your experience of yourself is a bundle of anxiety. Then there's two possible ways to fix it. You can change the id, right? Or you can change the superego, right?
So you can change yourself and what you really are as a fundamental person, or you can change the culture at large.
Exactly, right? So if I have anxiety, and I immediately say, why do I have anxiety? It's because of the pressures that the community is putting on me, right? It's because of the expectations that the community is putting on me, right? Then you have to change the community to get rid of your anxiety. This is why there's such but your id, if your id is just always telling you should want to sleep with anything and everything, and right, that and you should be able to, right? and the superego, the community, is telling you, no, you can't, then, and because of that, you have anxiety, then you have to change the community's standards, change the superego, so that it can tell you, no, it's actually okay. You can sleep with whoever you want. You can. So, right. That's what's going on all around us right now.
So why wouldn't you just say my id is the thing is broken, because you don't have any form of objectivity here in this situation? Why wouldn't you go back and say my id needs to be suppressed because it is the thing that is not functioning? Who has the standard on this? Where's the standard at in what's actually right?
So is it the standard? This is where, so what Freud says is the standard is actually your experience, right? Your anxiety is the problem, right? So the standard is your own self-awareness, your own experience. No, your ego, your experience of yourself, your self-awareness is the standard. So that's what we have to change, right? So if you're anxious, then that's a problem, because not being anxious is what you want to experience, right? So the desire of there isn't an outside objective standard where you say it's right or wrong to be anxious. Right.
So my mind is working the wrong way.
My experience, right? Yeah. So you're thinking.
Because I'm trying to figure out which one is right. Is it my id? Is it my ego, or is it super ego? Which one is actually, because I feel like I'm reading Eckhart Tolle all over again. Because Eckhart Tolle is Freudianism full-fledged on, just like with The Secret. It's the same thing. Because I'm trying to figure out, so then why wouldn't somebody say, oh, who's actually in charge of what the absolutely normative is? Is your id normal? Or is your ego normal? That's your experiences. Or is it the super ego that's actually the one that has normativity at this place? I'm trying to find
but the problem is normativity is not a part of the equation.
There's no objectivity at all.
This is why people actually, when people say, well, it's my truth, your truth, that's their experience, you can't judge it. Right. That it's because the scientific objectivity as a solution is the solution to an unpleasant experience, right? So pleasure is the only good, right? Pleasure is the only thing we're after. There's not an outside normative right and wrong in the framework at all.
So then whatever your id produces, it's okay.
It's okay. Yeah. And you may have to, there may be more pleasure in the suppression of it or the repression of it available, and then you should repress it. If there's not more pleasure in the repression of it, then you need to act on it, and you need a community in which it's okay to act on it.
That's how you get legalized pedophilia right there.
It is 100%. This is how there's no brakes on this system, and so that's the problem. That's the central problem with it.
Jason, when you said, let me get back on that. You just messed me up. So when you said like we're in it right now, all I could start thinking of was the social justice movement. All I could think of was the transgender movement. All I could think of was feminism. All I could think of is homosexuality. All that stuff in one way or another is operating like that because it's revolutionary, trying to change It's trying to change it through revolution, the ego. The super ego.
The super ego, right.
The super ego. Right. Because it doesn't like what it's experiencing in the ego that's being generated from the conflict from its id.
But the ego is passive. The ego is the self-aware experience of yourself, right? So you can't change the ego directly. It has to, so it's a passive experience. So you have to change either the id or the superego. And the problem is conservatives want to change the id, progressives want to change the superego, and nobody has realized that you're all wrong about everything.
Well, I want to say that conservatives aren't seeking to change the id anymore. I think
the conservatives, that was maybe the conservatives of the 70s, 80s, 90s.
I go back even before that, maybe.
Yeah.
100 years ago. All conservatives now, like just like Glenn Youngkin, here's a perfect example of that. Glenn Youngkin, who won his, did we talk about this at all? He won his whole thing on, I think I might have told you about it.
Yeah, you were telling me about this.
And he won Virginia because he had just saw that critical race theory was a really big issue. And so he ran to change his whole messaging to say, I'm going to fight against critical race theory. Gets inside of the governors, like in the first thing he did was sign 11 executive orders, decides to put a person inside of the DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion department, and that person changes the definition instead of destroying the whole institution.
Right.
Well, all he's doing now is he wants to control the super ego. That's all that is. Yeah.
And when somebody is fighting for the culture, what they're fighting for is they want to be the ones in charge of the super ego.
Right? Oh, we're so Freudian.
I know. It's really, this is, and this is what it drives me nuts. And so sometimes I'll say, like, well, look, it's not our job to build culture. Like, we're not fighting for the culture. None of that. But it's because it's, culture is not a thing, right? Culture is the observable patterns in which a people act, think, and create, right? Or destroy. The culture is not a thing in and of itself. Culture is something that you can observe, but it's an abstraction, right? What we need to do is reintegrate into the world as God made it, right? Is to become wise people who live well in the world that God made. And the culture flows out of that, right? If we focus on trying to fix the culture, we're falling into the abstraction trap, right? We need to focus on raising kids that know who they are and know what kind of world they live in. Raising kids that understand that they are existing in a covenantal universe, right? Raising kids that see. So one of the fundamental things that shifts and changes right as Freud comes to his height is they begin distrusting that language can really communicate. Right? That they begin they start thinking that the world is trying to lie to them, and that communication is an illusion. Here's a poem by E.E. Cummings that I think is a really good example of this. So E.E. Cummings was very gifted poet, but he didn't believe in poetry. In fact, he refused to capitalize anything or to use punctuation or because he thought that language was an illusion, right? The language was a power grab. And so he only wrote in lowercase letters. He refuse to capitalize his own name even, because he didn't believe in language. So this is called Next to, of course, God, America, I. Next to, of course, God, America, I love you, land of the pilgrims, and so forth. Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early, my country 'tis of centuries come and go. And are no more what of it we should worry in every language, even deaf and dumb. Thy sons acclaim your glorious name by gory, by jingo, by gee, by gosh, by gum. Why talk of beauty? What could be more beautiful than these heroic happy dead, who rushed like lions to the roaring slaughter? They did not stop to think, they died instead. Then shall the voice of liberty be mute. He spoke and drank rapidly a glass of water. It sounds almost like nonsense, but you can actually break it all down and find out where the punctuation would have gone, but he took it all out. And so you can't figure it out. And it's a perfect sonnet, right? In form, right? So he writes a perfect sonnet in form, but he takes out the actual communicative aspects of language that are all agreed upon by everyone. That, right? So why do we use a period the way we do? Well, just because we do, right? It's agreed upon by everyone. There's not an authority that tells us where the period goes. And he says, and he says, I refuse, because the people as a people group, if they're trying to tell me how to use a period, it's simply because they're trying to oppress me, right? Because that periods and commas and all of that is violence against us from being able to be who we want to be, right? So he looks at language, and so he's writing, and everyone at the time is like, oh my gosh, he's so brilliant. He's so smart. He is revealing to us the fact that language doesn't communicate. Of course, he's doing it all with language, but that's a whole nother issue, right? So they're losing faith that anything can hold together, right? That the center holds. They've lost faith that the center can hold on its own, that the center of a people can hold on its own. And so they start saying, well, then we need enough power and coercive force to hold this together, right? Or the chaos is going to break out, right?
Yeah.
So Machiavelli is now his metaphysic is echoing through the poets and the novelists of the day into the broader culture, and the fertile ground is the fact that that you do have the disintegration of the old understanding that the world is an integrated whole, and it's created in such a way that people fit well, right? So it's not enough to say we as conservatives should be able to control the superego, right? It's not enough to fight for the cultural definitions, right? We have to go back before God and kneel there and then say, okay, this is what covenants have you made? Where can I trust that you will be, Lord? Where can I find where have you bound yourself to be? And then how can I be there, find that solid center of the promise of God, and then work out from there, and find our integration first in God, and then go out and realize that the whole world actually has an integration point, right? It's Jesus, right? The whole world integrates in Jesus.
Universe,
right? He is, and then work out from there and discover the integration of the universe. Discover that it's a place in which we fit perfectly as human beings, and I don't think we can do that. Well, I mean, I think we have to dig all the way down to the old wells and find them again.
That's what I was going to ask. So, I mean, you kind of answered it a little bit, but as you're talking, I keep flashing back to our conversation earlier that the world in the turn of the century was all looking at everybody else running to this race for power. All of a sudden, we got to get our own countries generating the type of war machines and production that the rest of the Russia, they just got all. Have you seen what they've done? They took it over the private sector, what do they call it? They had a name for it, war socialism.
Yeah.
And it seems that when you are watching everyone around you run and grasp for this power, you kind of get afraid because you're like, man, if they get that kind of power of the federal government, let's just take it now. If the social justice movement, if the transgender movement get their hands on the positions of power in the federal government, we are done.
Yeah.
And so you have this tendency to hurry up. We have to engage this thing. We know that there's a time for, we were just talking about this. And so what you do is you drop everything, or you make a beeline and you go to the place where you have the most potential form of hurt. And so you go after it, trying to get it before they do.
Right.
But that's not, but the way you're talking, but that's not the way.
No. So why did they pick Saul to be king?
Because he looked like everybody else, and he looked like a king.
It says he was head and shoulders
above
everyone else, right? They said, we need our own giant. The world's got giants. We need our own giant, right?
They had God.
So they picked the tallest guy, right? They were like the 10 spies that came back and said, oh man, the giants are so big. I don't think we can ever take over. And then you had 2 spies that said, like, they're going to echo when they hit the ground because they are so big. Let's go get them, right? The
world is going to hear the champion of our
the
Lord,
world is going to hear the sound when these giants go down. Right? And so the first thing is we actually need to relearn the promises of God, right? Because I think I've mentioned this before, but the breakdown that Machen gives about what is faith, he says, well, there is faith is believing the promises of God, right? When you believe something that God hasn't promised, that's called presumption. When you don't believe what God has promised, it's faithlessness. When you believe what God has promised, it's faith, right? And but in order to have faith, you actually have to know what God has promised. We have stopped preaching the promises of God in our pulpits. We've stopped declaring the promises of God. And so our people can't live by faith. They come to church with the promise of therapy.
Freudianism,
right? There's this therapeutic deism.
Moralistic deism,
therapeutic moralistic deism. And here's the thing: the reason that the church responded to Einstein the way that it did was because they were all deists, right? They were all Unitarians, and even if not by declaration, which some of them were, they were definitely deists by practice. And so when something is discovered about the creation that the way that it was, they said, well, that doesn't look like a watchmaker, the watchmaker that I know, right? It was because he was like, well, yeah, but it's not. Now, whether Einstein was right or not is a whole nother deal, right? Like there's there's a lot of evidence that black holes don't actually exist. And a lot of Einstein's understanding ended up requiring the existence of black holes and things. So if black holes are proven to be mathematically impossible, and then a lot of the Einstein's fundamental understanding of the nature of the physical nature of the universe might end up being disproven in our lifetime. I suspect it will. But
wow,
it got hold of the imagination of the entire English speaking world, and all of Europe, right? It got hold of the imagination in such a way that people that had assumed that the universe had to be held together in a particular way, in a watchmaker type of Newtonian universe, that when they discovered that it wasn't, the deism just blew up, disappeared, right? A whole generation walked away because they were deists, thinking that the world functioned like a clock. That the imaginative, the landscape of their imagination required a particular kind of universe, and when somebody said they discovered the universe didn't function that way, the landscape burned down, right? And this is and when Freud stepped into this burning landscape, he offered a whole nother way to imagination of a generation, and then that generation has passed down that particular landscaping in our imagination. And so when you talk about you mentioned the Freudian slip, right? That's when the id, so if you, let's say, you have an underdeveloped Oedipal complex, which is the desire to kill your father and sleep with your mother, right?
Okay.
And that is there in your id, right? Your id wants that, but the superego says, no, you can't do that, right? And so your ego is in this conflicted position in between your id and your superego. But a Freudian slip is when you accidentally let it slip out, right? Where when you call your wife mom accidentally, well, that's because you've actually got this real desire and it's pushing up, and it just slipped through, and you accidentally call your wife mom because really what you want to do is sleep with your mom, right? That's a Freudian slip.
Oh my goodness.
That your invisible desires, your desires which are invisible to you,
start
slip
coming
through your language, right? It slips through in your dreams, right? You have dreams about things, and there's this whole symbolic thing, this symbolic way of interpreting dreams that he develops, and then Carl Jung takes to the next level. And it's this symbolic understanding of archetypes and all sorts of things that you are interpreting the world through, but the superego is suppressing. So your experience of yourself, your experience of your own life is developed in this context, and then it keeps slipping through because the pressure is real, right? We unless we get rid of that entire system and re-landscape our imaginations, we are not going to find freedom from the anxiety that living in this imaginative landscape causes, right? So and one of the things
you think that we are living in that landscape proper? Like, I don't think anybody would ever be able to explain. I mean, we got The Secret, which is popular and is making waves because people are saturated and baptized in it, I guess, in one sense or another. But you think that we're still living pretty heavily in that sort? Okay.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So I mean, I think, but it's all in the background of our imaginations. It's the way,
it's how we're operating.
It's how we operate, right? So when
oh, that's so great! Like, hey, treat yourself today. It's
exactly.
That's a good point.
You've got
the commercials.
It's all over the place. It's the way people sell things to us, right? And even as Christians, we know we feel the tension when we judge the way people feel about something, right? Because before Freud, you would talk about, why do you study literature? Why do you study stories? Why do you tell stories? Well, part of that is because our emotions need to be trained to respond properly to reality. And literature and poetry is the way that we run our emotions through their training, so that they're trained to respond properly to reality when we experience it.
Disney understands that.
Yeah. So totally. Disney understands that. And that is the case, right? Our emotions are trained by the stories that we tell. The difference is now, if you try to say, brother, your emotions need to be retrained, we even feel the tension in saying it, even when we know it's true, because emotions are something that are not something that we will, right? Our emotions are something that we experience in the passive sense. The passive, which is true, right? We experience our emotions in the passive. We don't will our emotions, but we can, but saying that somebody's emotional response was wrong feels tense.
Because we already know that the superego doesn't like it when you talk about somebody's emotional situation. And
right.
So we are experiencing that kind of culture and worldview, even in our trying to act rightly about the situation.
Even when we're trying, right. Even when we experience the anxiety of it, because our imagination has been landscaped so heavily because
that's good. So we come up with ways to try and get around it by saying, what's a nice way or a unique way, or how can I be clever in saying this so that, this is why I don't know if this is, but this is why people need more social awkwardness, because that goes away. Like it completely destroys. It's funny you say it, because I'm very aware of the environment at large. And because of that, I know how you can and can't act and and this is why you see Jesus coming in a situation is like, you know what? Didn't I tell you my house be called a house of prayer? I'm beating y'all up out of here for 40 acres. Right. You know what I mean? Like you see, that's socially that's not allowed, right? But he's just coming through,
But he knew his place in the universe, right? He knew what actually held together and integrated the world around him, and he knew where he fit in it. And so he looked at that and said, this is not how it's supposed to be. I am how it's supposed to be right now, and that's not. And so he flipped over tables and ran out the money changers and the people selling doves, because he knew that he was looking at house leprosy. Right. He was looking at the house leprosy on the temple and saying, now that shouldn't be here. I'm the priest. I know my position. I know who I am. I know what kind of universe God created. I know where I fit into it. And so I'm going to cleanse this place. Right. And so he steps in, he cleanses it. At the beginning of his ministry, he cleanses the temple and then of the house leprosy. And then he comes back again at the end of his ministry, and he cleanses it again, and he drives out the people selling doves, because that's the thing you need to be able to cleanse your house ritually of house leprosy. And it's got house leprosy, and it's back. And you know what you do with a house that has house leprosy? You cleanse it, and the priest comes back. You got to knock it down. Yeah. So he leaves the temple, and he says, not one stone will be left upon another.
Man, you better get it. Well, you better stop. That right there, boy.
But that's a way of viewing the universe, that it's held together by the covenants of God.
That's what that is reading Leviticus and seeing that
it is. Leviticus
that's what that is. That's covenantally understood. Well, but it's amazing because until you start reading Leviticus, you don't understand what's happening in the New Testament. Like, what is Jesus doing? That's what he's doing.
Right.
That's
but
so good.
I just saw a meme that said, it was like, it was people making a New Year's resolution to read the Bible, and then it was a train, and then the next one was a train wreck, and it said people hitting Leviticus.
Yeah,
right. It's a funny meme, and that's true,
because they don't get it.
The reason, though, that we that we hit Leviticus and we say, what the hell is going on, is because we don't believe in an integrated universe. And so none of the symbolic meaning, it's telling us here's the covenantal structure of the universe, right? Leviticus is revealing the covenantal structure of the universe poetically, right? Symbolically. When we don't believe there is a covenantal structure of the universe, and when we don't believe that symbolic communication is real, we're never going to read Leviticus and make any sense of it, right? Modern art is the declaration that images can't communicate, right? It's the declaration that images can't communicate. It is the language modern art says about images. In an integrated universe, Jesus is the Word, and he's the image of God. Word and images all communicate. When I drive down the street and I see frozen trees all along the side of the road, God is speaking something to me. Right? That image is truly communicating a reality about the fundamental nature of everything. Right? Leviticus is training wheels on the covenantal nature of reality. We can't even figure out how to attach the training wheels. Right? So we can't figure out how to even get the training wheels on, because we are so far gone.
Well, let's put some training wheels on this one, because I, as you were talking, man, this has helped me so much. But how do we? I guess first thing is, we kind of can see, everybody knows in one way or another they're dealing with Freud, I guess. How do you get them out of the conversation? How do you end the conversation with them? What are some practical things to do? In you know, it always starts with self-government first. Like everything that we talk about always starts with self-government. And so maybe let's work our way out from individually all the way into those spheres. Let's say self-government, family government, church government, to civil government. Kind of work through from there. How do we start removing the stain or the conversation of Freud inside of that we're having right now?
Yeah. I mean, so when it comes to self-government, when we know that most of the failures of our faith right now begin as failures of our imagination, right? They begin in that our imagination has been landscaped according to a different story. And so we can't identify the character I am in this story, what story I'm in, what character I'm in. We can't identify that. Our world, our imagination needs to be re-landscaped according to the images of Scripture. Right. So,
okay, can I pause you right there? I just want to pause because I want to say that, because I think I totally agree with you. What I'm noticing about Gnosticism and a lot of the other things that we've talked about is that we are bringing presuppositions from some other place into. This is why people can't understand Leviticus, is because they're bringing a different Genesis or understanding of Genesis as they read through Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. As they're reading through those, they brought a different beginning. That's why, as I've read through my family been going through this in the Bible. When we get to Leviticus, it's been amazing to me to watch my kids say, "Oh, this was back in Genesis. Oh, God did this," and they're directly connecting Leviticus and Genesis and covenant relationship and sacrifice easily because of that understanding. So it's not. So when you go ahead,
well, and I think we need to be willing to think of ourselves approaching the Scripture like children again, right? Kids, they just visually imagine everything as you read it. There's a really great kids Bible called the Lyons Children's Bible that we used in my house when my kids were little, and they all still remember it. Yeah, it's really good. It tells the story of the Bible as a covenant story, and a developing covenant story. It's really, really helpful. That it actually helped me significantly to read that to my kids, because all of a sudden I've started to see some of the connections, but so much because God communicates through language, music, and image simultaneously, because he is triune and his communication is real and triune. We need to learn to hear the Bible musically as well as images, as well as in its images, right? And so, I mean, we started with the book of Revelation with my kids, but we would read it and then act it out. Leviticus, if you read it and act it out, it's amazing how many of the images start to just begin to make sense, right? Why is it that you lean your hands onto the head of the goat before you kill it? Right? It doesn't tell you, it doesn't explain. I mean, the book of Hebrews eventually does, but there's a whole interaction image in the images that's telling you about the nature of reality,
right?
In terms of our sin and our relationships and our and covenant representation and things along those lines. So I think it begins with Scripture and letting the images of Scripture landscape your imagination. And then I think just like digging in on the sacraments and trusting that those sacraments, those covenant signs and seals, are absolutely fundamental to the nature of the universe, the nature of the way we interact with God. They're the ones that tell us where we fit, right? It is, you know, because if your pastor gets up and preaches a bunch of the promises of God, you might think that he's preaching to another person down the pew. When you eat the bread and drink the wine, you are those promises are being signed and sealed to you as an individual. Somebody else can't chew and swallow for you, right? So when your pastor gets up and says God loves you, the you might be meant for somebody else in the congregation, but as soon as you eat that bread and drink that wine, you realize the you is you, right? That promise has been sealed to you as an individual, right?
Jason,
the
this
promises
is why
of God individuate into the world through water, bread, and wine.
This is why the view of the table is so important, because you're right. It does. Every Sunday, it is reestablishing for us, this is how God made the world.
Right. Yeah. This is
wow. Okay.
So that's individual government. Are we out of time?
No, I'm just wondering, you know, as I'm hearing this and thinking about this, I'm just thinking about the fact that, boy, we've really taken the sacraments for granted, and we've so super spiritualized them that they don't have any realities and tangibility in the world that we live in, which makes me upset. It's a remembrance thing. It's just for remembrance. It's just remembrance.
Yeah, but that means that everything important goes on in our heads. It's just for remembrance.
That's Gnosticism.
It is. But I think that's the reason. I think the modern world exists because of the Anabaptist view of the Lord's Supper.
Dang. Yeah, we out of time. Yeah, we out of.
It's the metaphysic of mere memorialism is the metaphysic of modernism.
We're gonna have to do another one. Do you think we hit, like, is Freud good? Like, we good on Freud? Or
I think we're good on Freud. I think.
Okay, my goodness, I don't think we can do this anymore. You can't be saying stuff like that.
We're gonna get you in trouble.
Oh man, look. I say every week, if you're single, get married. You marry, have kids. You have kids, go baptize them. I don't mess with Baptists and they Lord's Supper stuff. Listen, you don't. That's a bridge too far, Jason.
I know it is. It is.
That's a bridge.
I've never met a bridge that didn't burn. That's my.
Especially when it's got Gnosticism written all over. Okay, all right, I'm done. No more.
So the thing is like, this is, and I think I've mentioned this to you before. I didn't come into Calvinism through the 5 points. I came into Calvinism through Calvin's sacramental theology. Right, that's where I met Calvin for the first time, and it's so beautiful. Right, his understanding of a covenantal, sacramental theology in which God Himself meets us and feeds us through the power of the Holy Spirit and the mystery of His binding Himself in His promises to the sacramental act, right? The sacramental that how do we know that we're forgiven? Well, because we just chewed and swallowed forgiveness, right? He says, how do you know you're forgiven? By mastication, by chewing, right? We chew and swallow the promises of God. He binds Himself through his promises to his people. And then by faith, we have our sins forgiven. And those promises, he doesn't just, they are not simply declared, they are covenantally enacted through the sacraments, right? So how do I know that I carry the name of God? Well, because God put it on me through the waters of baptism, right? So and the blessings are ours by faith, right? The only way to keep covenant is by faith. There's no other way to keep covenant except by faith, right? We're saved by faith alone, but we're saved in a covenantal world by God's covenantal act, by God's covenantal way of interacting with the world. So I love the 5 points too. They're wonderful.
Yeah. But that's what I've always, go ahead.
But that they exist in a covenantal world.
Right. That's right.
And then they're beautiful. You separate them from the covenantal world, and you get
new Calvinism.
Yeah.
Whatever that is.
Which doesn't even last a whole generation. It's walked away from half,
but really what you get to is a fragmented world, even if you don't take the rest of it. So you might not get new Calvinism, but what you get is a fragmented world, and you get it's funny, but Calvinism and dispensationalism can't live together.
No.
I mean, ultimately, they really can't. At the end of the day, otherwise, you can take the 5 points out and then dust it off, separate it, and segregate it from the intent or the rest of the body. But then you don't have Calvinism.
No,
right?
And you have a continuous anxiety, right? You have the people that are always wondering if they're elect. Am I elect? Am I not elect? Right?
Man, you better say that. You better say that.
Right. So you've got this almost ratcheting up of the modern anxiety.
How do you know you're really a Christian? Listen to this podcast. Listen to this sermon. Now you can know you're really a Christian. How do you really know? Oh, man. Wow. Are you really, really in? Are you really in?
I mean,
how do you know you're really in?
I asked Jesus into my heart every day for like 9 months, 10 months after I first became a Christian, because I thought that was the sacramental entry point, and I wasn't ever sure if I did it right. I mean, now I look back and I understand that now, but every night I'd say, okay, Lord, just in case I didn't do it right last time, will you please come into my heart? Right. Because I thought that's how you became a Christian. It all depended upon, did I do it right? Did I mean it well enough? Did I mean it hard enough? Right. And even if you're not asking Jesus into your heart, because that language will throw some off, but still you're going about the process of repenting that same way to become a Christian. And that's how I got to the place where I'm like, did I lose my salvation? Because that's the same thing, right? It's the exact same. Yeah, it's just from the other direction. And then somebody hands me started with the Golden Booklet of the True Christian Life by John Calvin, which is selections from the Institutes, and I was like, well, this is really great. What else? Where else do I get more of this? And then book 4 of the Institutes was where I finally came to understand that I didn't have to work for my salvation, right? Like his Calvin on the Church and the Sacraments. And I actually read book 4. I started book 1, and then as I was the gentleman that was walking me through my baptism class, who had walked me through my baptism class, when he discovered my anxiety about salvation, he was like, "I just jump to book 4." Right. This is, and he was right. That sacramental theology was what, that covenantal understanding was what was causing me to not understand how to know if I was saved or not. Right. I was trying to examine my faith rather than looking at the promises of God with my faith.
That is exact, man. That's exactly it. Okay. So do you think, okay, we hit 2 hours kind of, but so, well, we have, I think from the you kind of hit, even though you were talking about individuals and their way to kind of fight Freudianism, it really hit like the individual in the church, because the individual is believing the promises of God and they're going back and trusting. You have to know those promises. You got to know the word of God. You have to be saturated in scripture and understanding, like going back to the word of God, like a kid, to understand the story that you're in. The church and the sacraments are the tangible realities of those truths in every Sunday taking communion. This is why every Sunday having communion is so important. That's
what Calvin argued for. Calvin wanted weekly communion. He was in a time when they were doing yearly communion, but he said, is it even really a sermon if you don't have the sacraments? Right? A sermon is a declaration of the promises of God. The sacraments are the sign and the seal of the promises of God. Right? So you're just continually doing evangelism if you don't have the Lord's Supper. Right? Because the Lord's Supper is how the sermon is sealed to your congregation.
It's like smelling food and not eating it. Is that what it's like?
Yeah. Well, and evangelism is you're constantly trying to invite people to the feast, right? But unless they repent, they can't come to the feast. And you have a sermon without the supper is just you keep evangelizing your congregation over and over rather than actually letting them know they're part of the family.
Okay, so the last area in this, so we got individuals, we have so individuals going back to the scriptures, reading them with new eyes, like children.
Yep.
Being able to see the tangible realities of that in the church through the preaching and the sacraments, right? Mm-hmm. Those two things together. And then as it resorts now, as we go to the civil magistrate, which is in an all-out war right now,
right?
For it's whose God it's going to submit to, and being made a God even into itself. How do you deal with that now?
Yeah, well, and I think this is where so in a real sense, the way the church won over the civil magistrate was by showing it a better way, right? So England is a good example, right? Where you had all of the Roman court systems were functioning, and not great, but they were functioning. But then as the Roman system the Roman civil magistrate starts to fall apart, Britain is out on the edges of the empire. And so when the paychecks stop arriving for the Roman judges and police and civil magistrate, they just basically pack up and go home, head back to Rome. The church governments, the church court system, the church governments are functioning so well that they turn and they look and they say, will you take care of our civil society as well? And they say, well, we'll take care of it until we can reestablish it, right? And so the court systems of the church split into a civil side and a canon side, a church side.
That's right.
And then they basically rebuild the court system from inside and then reestablish the civil government. But it's because the church was functioning so well, right? You have
the people who are supposed to be able to judge angels, right? Will you not judge angels and you can't handle the situation?
Yeah. So they look at them and they say, okay, what do we do? They say, well, we'll hold the fort down and then become the place where the civil government kind of reestablishes itself from. You have the same thing when, excuse me, you have the same thing that happens to the family when the tribal systems are basically undermined as people begin to convert. The family, if you are in a tribal religion and you convert to Christianity, you lose your family.
Yeah.
Right. in the early church, the monasteries are the place where you go when you lose your family because you convert away from the tribal religion. The monasteries are places where the family is rebuilt and then sent back out into the world as the tribal systems all fail and fall apart and begin being replaced by the system of kings and knights and what we know of as the Middle Ages. That so the church, I think, needs to get its own house in order so that it is ready to rebuild the civil magistrate when it collapses in on itself. Because that's what's coming. I mean, there's no way to look around and think that the world is tribalizing everywhere, right? And an empire, you've got a bunch of different people a bunch of different civil magistrates vying for the imperial power. Imperial power has not worked since Jesus became King of Kings. Right? Imperial power is not available. We've got an emperor already. Jesus is the emperor, and when people try to become emperors, it doesn't even last a generation, right? You've got Napoleon, you've got Hitler, right? You've got the USSR, all these attempts at empires.
That job has been filled. Right.
There's not an opening for emperor. Jesus is already the King of Kings. That's what an emperor is, King of Kings. That job's full. So we see these imperial aspirations, and we need to think, okay, when they hit the ceiling and come crashing back down, the church has to get its house in order so that we are ready to handle the needs, to serve the needs of the people. Like we've been in this story before, right? We know what's happening, and we also need to know that the what does it look like for the emperor to hit the ceiling, right? It looks like Polycarp, right? It looks like the church's preparations for martyrdom, and be ready to say, okay, I know this story, right? I know, we need to be reading our Eusebius and reading our Fox's Book of Martyrs, and know, I know this story. When the emperor hits the ceiling, they look around and try to blame someone for the fact that they keep bumping up against the ceiling. And they are going
Christians
to blame God's people because they're the ones reflecting the King of Kings that is actually in the way. Right?
Whose kingdom they're trying to steal.
They're trying to take the King of Kings, but they keep bumping into the bottom of his throne, and they say, well, who's in the way? They look just like the king that's in the way. So we start killing him. And that's when our covenant head says, nope. So we need to know that our shield and defender is Jesus. And so when they start killing Christians, we know that that's the beginning of him taking his sword out. That's the sound of the sheath being taken off of the sword, and be ready for that. And in the meantime, be getting our house in order, because when the collapse happens, that's an opportunity for the church to minister in that civil realm.
I think we need, first of all, amen. And I think we need to do a show on, if you're a Christian, you're a Reconstructionist, whether you like it or not. It's not, because here's the deal. You don't have any options.
Yeah.
Like if you're discipling the nations to do what exactly? To do what? What are you discipling to do? You're going to disciple them to obey Jesus in every aspect of life, And so even if you don't like the name and you don't like the title, and you don't like the ones that came before you who were, you don't have any options.
Right.
Christians are going to be the ones to disciple the nations to obey Jesus. And so you're a Reconstructionist. You might disagree with the title of the words or the people who came before you who beat you to it, but you better believe you are, Baptist or not, charismatic or not, Presbyterian or not.
Like, this is the conversation we're going to be having at some point. We may as well learn the vocabulary.
We're having it now. I started having this conversation 10, 12 years ago when I understood what was going on and could look at the world and with very narrow vision. 2020 hit, and all of a sudden John MacArthur became a Reconstructionist publicly.
Right.
They don't like the title, they don't like the words, but everything they are doing is inside of the worldview. They don't have a choice. He is telling the president, the governor, the government who the king is and what the church is in that kingdom.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And what his job is in that kingdom.
And our discussion should be, and I get if you've got Reconstructionists that are doing it badly.
Sure, exactly. Just like you got Christians who are doing it badly.
You say, okay, that's fine, but let's talk about how to do it well then, right? What does it look like to be a good citizen of the King of Kings, to be a good, pilgrim on the journey? Like, let's talk about it, but let's not refuse to have the conversation because somebody did it poorly.
Jason, you done put I feel like you put another weapon, not just like it gave me another more ammo. You put another weapon in my bag today, bro. I'm loaded right now.